from the All Indiana Podcast Network.
It's time for real conversation about the real issues that affect our communities.
Poverty, education, equality, and more.
This is Real Talk.
Real Talk with Reverend Charles Harrison.
Welcome to Real Talk on the All Indiana Podcast. I'm Reverend Charles Harrison, and on this episode, I will be talking to Rick Snyder, president of the FOP 86 here in Indianapolis, Marion County. Welcome to Real Talk with Reverend Charles Harrison, and I am so excited to have a good friend of mine back with me today, Rick Snyder from the FOP. Rick, how you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you, Reverend?
Well, I am doing well. I'm doing well today, and I want to talk about a few things, and I know you just came back from a trip, and share a little bit about where you were and in D.C., and talk a little bit about that, and then we can talk about other issues and certainly the violence in Indianapolis.
Yeah, we had the opportunity to be in Washington, D.C. for the annual Police Week, which is the annual National Law Enforcement Memorial that occurs every May 15th. That was established all the way back under President John F. Kennedy. And since the 1980s into the 1990s, the Fraternal Order of Police has gathered survivors, the family members of fallen officers, each year in Washington to commemorate those latest officers who have laid down their life in service to their communities. So this year, we had more officers than we've ever had in our nation's history that we added to the wall. We added 563 names of fallen officers. Now, those include officers that were feloniously killed, officers that have died in the line of duty from traffic crashes and things such as that, but also COVID-related deaths and something that a lot of people forget anymore these days, which are legacy deaths from 9/11. We still have many officers that are dying these decades later from exposure issues that they suffered during the 9/11 attacks in New York. And so it was a monumental event, a monumental task. Well, we are very involved from Indianapolis and Indiana in helping to provide support services so that those memorials can occur. And that culminates with a service on the lawn of the United States Capitol building. We were joined by the President of the United States again this year in recognizing those families and their names. I have the unique role now of serving as the chaplain for the National Fraternal Order of Police, so I was able to lead our nation in prayer alongside the President when we commenced the memorial service. So it was a high honor and just something that is very unique and a great honor to be able to be a part of.
Are we seeing, Rick, more incidences of police officers being shot or killed in the line of duty compared, to some of the more recent years? Are we seeing an increase in that, or is it about what normally happens in the course of a year with the shooting and deaths of police officers?
No, it's definitely gone up. The attacks on law enforcement officers have, and we often think of the shootings, and rightfully so, but officers are attacked in a myriad of ways, including with knives, edged weapons, automobiles, which is the big one, officers that are ran over. We just had another officer that was killed. She was trying to deploy stop sticks to help stop a vehicle that was fleeing from police, and the suspect struck her with his vehicle while she was attempting to do that, and she was killed in that incident. But the latest statistics, just this mid-May, for this year, we have had 133 officers shot in the line of duty, 20 of which have been killed by the gunfire. So we typically only think of those officers who have died from violence. Right. But we forget that there's an officer shot on average almost every single day in our country now.
Wow.
And 20 killed by gunfire. What's really concerning, Rev, is this. We're seeing a significant increase in ambush-style attacks on our law enforcement officers, meaning that it's a premeditated setup ambush that includes the officers. We had 41 law enforcement officers that were shot in 26 separate ambush-style attacks. So that means 26 attacks multiple officers being shot in those. That's a 34% increase in the number of officers shot in the line of duty since this same time frame in 2020. And that's really interesting to look at because that time frame was pre-pandemic riots, all this sudden shift in our country. And, we're seeing a 34% increase, which is very alarming.
Well, what is leading to that? What's leading to more and more attacks against police officers in our society today? And certainly we have seen it since, COVID-19 and the post riots in this country. So any idea and conversations law enforcement has been having as to why we're seeing this increase?
Well, I always point this out because sometimes you hear our politicians try to utilize COVID as a cause for the increase in crime. There's nothing that demonstrates that. It's not been able to be scientifically proven. What has been shown is that oftentimes restrictions involved with COVID have played a significant role. When we had a lockdown and we were forcing people to stay cooped up together, but also the fact that law enforcement officers, uniformed law enforcement officers, are the most visible representation of government. We wear these distinct uniforms. We drive these funky looking cars that have all these graphics on them, and they have lights and sirens all over them and everything else. And so it's the officers who are in the neighborhoods 24 hours a day alongside the residents. And oftentimes the officers bear the brunt of the frustration that communities have for policy failures of our political establishment. It's not saying that it's right or wrong. It's saying that I'm speaking of the frustration. But the violence definitely is unacceptable. But it's the officers who bear the brunt of that. And I have to say this, there's also been a very distinct move toward demonizing the police and at the same time dehumanizing the police. Now, Rev, you and I talk about this a lot, especially from a faith perspective, but this is a significant contributor. It's a symptom of the bigger problem we have in our nation, which is the loss of the sanctity of life. And when you start to dehumanize folks, listen, it can work in reverse. If our officers start to dehumanize the population that we serve, our fellow neighbors, our residents that we serve, that's a recipe for disaster. And that's why we always drive home to our officers, get out of your cars, interact with the public. These are your neighbors. Know the people that you're serving in your neighborhoods. Because I always say this. You've heard me say this for decades now. Don't forget the people behind the blinds. The folks in the neighborhoods who have been really trapped inside their homes because of crime and violence in the neighborhood that can't come out and show their support for you. They're still there. They need you there. They want you there. And they're peeking out those blinds whenever the police are out there engaging in the neighborhood. Don't forget those folks because that's who you're serving there. And if you start to lose sight of the humanity involved in this whole, not just profession, but our whole way of life, it's a recipe for disaster.
This is Real Talk with Reverend Charles Harrison, and my guest today is Rick Snyder from the FOP. Rick, yesterday was a very tragic day in our country, and we had another mass shooting, 19 children killed in the elementary school, 2 teachers, by another teenager, 18-year-old. I think a lot of people are struggling with trying to come up with answers and what do we do to try to prevent this? And you and I know in the work you do as law enforcement, the work I do as a pastor and walking the streets with 10 Point, we certainly have a major societal problem in this country when it comes to violence and what you just stated, the disregard for the sanctity of human life. How do we address these issues without politicizing them? Because, immediately yesterday, people started politicizing the issues. I don't know, Rick, if universal gun background checks is the answer. I don't know what to do with the assault weapons in this country. All I know is that I can buy almost any gun I want in the urban core on the black market, and I see that with a lot of young people. I see young people on the streets who are teenagers with handguns and extended clips that could do just as much damage as a rifle and assault weapon. But I don't know what the answer is, and would love to hear your perspective on this.
Well, it's always interesting because I always point this out. You're right. It often gets politicized, and I'm always suspect of someone when they start speaking politically about an issue in the middle of the issue, when I have not heard them speak of the issue outside the immediacy of what just occurred. Right. Does that make sense?
That makes sense, yes.
And now if somebody is always fighting for tougher gun laws and all these other things, so be it. However, you don't often find that. A few things. One is we still don't know any of the facts. Right. And here's the first thing that police officers always fall back to. To fall into the trap of just simply making this an issue about guns, about the tool involved in the violence, is a tragic trap to fall into. What do I mean when I say that? Well, because we see all too often that folks will use any resource available to inflict violence when the decision is made to do that. It's really a symptom of a bigger issue, which are these heart issues. Guns have been around forever.
Right.
By the way, I'd point out that guns also save many lives, and that's officers can attest to that because we carry them and deploy them when necessary to protect and defend life of ourselves and others. However, when you fold in the combination of tools that can take a life with the heart of somebody bent on evil, you have a bad combination there. And the only thing that's going to stop that from occurring is somebody else countering that, often with violence. What kind of what stops somebody committing violence where they are just killing multiple children? It's probably going to take another amount of violence to overcome that.
Yeah, certainly that's what happened yesterday.
And that's where our law enforcement officers come into play, correct?
Yes.
So that really is just a symptom of the bigger problem. So, officers also look at things of we've gone through a significant period of time where we just listened to many, many, many people advocate for the last 2 years to remove armed police officers from our schools.
That's true.
Now, that's a fact.
That's true. Yeah, that's true.
And our officers said, be careful with that.
Right.
Why? Now, here's the bigger issue. Why does this keep happening in our schools? I mean, we do have mass killings in other venues, but it definitely occurs in our schools at an abnormal rate.
Right.
Why is that? I think that's a fair question. And what we find is, one, those are high value damage, if you will. And that's speaking of our children.
Right.
Right?
Right.
You're not going to hurt a community, a society more than attacking the children of that community.
Yes, that's true.
So again, evil will also what? Always follow the path of least resistance. Right. Well, if you have a high value victim there, being the children in our community, and then they are within what's considered a soft target, meaning you don't have strong territorial reinforcement for that site, the school. How did the person get into the school? Were there armed personnel at the school? And, we're hearing bits and pieces now, and it sounds like there very well could have been.
Yeah, that's
may have played a role in changing course for this suspect, even for as bad as the damage was, the lives that were lost, or could have been many, many more. We got to look at those things. We got to say as a community, what are we doing to harden those sites, being our schools, our daycares, from being soft targets for easy prey for violent offenders hell-bent on destruction? What are we doing about that? Because that's where they're going to go. Now, this isn't a secret. We've been having these discussions in law enforcement for the last 30 years. There's very well-known subject matter experts on these issues. And everything has pointed to this is what is coming, and it's coming even more. It was also a significant concern for us when we were after 9/11 with terroristic attacks. We really believed that our schools were going to be next. And many would suggest they still are. I think it just begs the question, what are we doing to strengthen the security at our schools? What are we doing to make them difficult targets to penetrate and take advantage of, quite frankly? And then on top of that, what are we doing to enhance the responsiveness of our officers by either being on site or close by? Now, in Indianapolis, we've talked about this. 4 years ago, we launched what was called the Think Bigger initiative. And we talked about this very issue, which is how can we use technology to enhance the responsiveness of our officers in a real-time attack such as this. And we looked at technology that was available that would allow, it was called tap, swipe, tap technology on cell phones, where apps could be downloaded, and on those cell phones in the middle of an attack, anybody in that school system could tap, swipe, tap their screen on a cell phone, and it would automatically activate their phone to the 911 center, turn on their GPS, pinpoint where they were, activate their cameras on their phones so that 911 could see what was going on, and the person calling wouldn't have to speak or make any noise whatsoever. It would also put out an automatic alert to any officer so close to that building within a geographic area, whether they were at home or at work, so that they could immediately respond with their highly customized, specialized equipment to respond to that. Those are things that are still available to us. We've advocated for technology such as gunshot detection technology, where we have said, don't just put it through the city, like we've talked about downtown and Near East Side, but also invite your schools to adopt that technology on site for the facilities, so that if any gunshots were detected, they could immediately be pinpointed, alert the police, and direct the police to where the shots were coming from, inside and outside of the schools. We've also advocated for public safety cameras and license plate reader technology that identifies and catalogs anyone coming onto that school property or leaving from there. What if you have somebody that makes an attack and then escapes? Wouldn't it be good to see what the vehicle looked like, what the license plate was, who the person was, and also the technology to identify the gunshots? These are all things that we can be doing, setting aside the politics of the day, that can actually help in these instances. And we've got to have tough discussions with our schools and our adults, but also with our children about violence. Now, here's the flip side, Rev.
Okay.
I know it's a long answer, but it's important.
Okay.
The flip side is this. We also have to be asking ourselves, how much do we promulgate and promote violence in our society? How much are we putting our children in front of television shows and movies that portray violence in a positive light and shows those things? How many times do we put children in front of video games that not only show them how to shoot, but teach them how to shoot and kill in our society? And we look the other way.
And music. Yes.
That glorifies such a lifestyle, but also the dehumanizing of life.
Yes.
These are big issues that we've got to tackle and we've got to talk about.
Well, the last two mass shootings in Buffalo and in Texas, it seemed like in Buffalo there was a police officer who was a security guard, a former police officer that was a security guard. He seemed to be with the body armor that the gentleman had on, seemed to be outgunned. And yesterday or this morning, I heard that there was a school police officer that first encountered the individual.
And I heard that they believe that engagement is what caused the suspect to throw to ground more ammunition.
More ammunition. Yes, I heard that. It is part of the issue. Do we? That officers sometimes are outgunned because of the weapons and the body armor with some of these individuals that are doing these mass shootings? Or
not necessarily outgunned, but maybe matched.
Okay.
So one of the things we did in Indianapolis, people forget about, is that the FOP fought for and got funding. And I give credit to the mayor of Indianapolis and the city county council. You'll remember this. Provided funding to provide a Kevlar helmet and rifle plate body armor for every single officer in the city of Indianapolis. Why is that important? Well, it gives all of us that customized equipment to each officer. It's readily available. And when we know shots are being fired, that would be a good time to be able to deploy that equipment.
Okay.
That has made a drastic difference. It also greatly enhances the ability of our officers. Remember, I said if you have an officer at home.
Right.
Remember, we keep this in Indianapolis. We keep the equipment with those officers. That's why it's such a benefit to Indianapolis residents to have this decentralized fleet, where our officers keep their car with them because they have all that equipment with them. Right. And so they can respond off duty from home. Maybe they're out shopping, doing their errands before they go in to start their shift, and they get the alert of this active attack that's occurring at the grocery store or at the school nearby. They can immediately respond, even in their T-shirt and shorts, don that equipment, and go to work to help intervene and interrupt that attack. That's crucially important for a city our size. And I think the biggest thing is this. Some people say, well, the easiest thing is just to outlaw those guns, that ammunition, high-capacity magazines. Go talk to any police officer. We're going to shake our head at you and tell you that's not going to do anything. The outlaws already don't follow the law.
Well, that's
As
true.
you just said, the outlaws have a black market where you can get any of that already.
Yeah, you can.
So that doesn't really, while people are coming from the right place in their heart on that, it's really not a factual solution to the situation. The best thing to do is prevention on the front end, but then strong intervention when it is needed. That means a well-equipped police force, but also well-trained teachers, students as well. What do you do when an active attack occurs? Hey, we teach our kids how to exit a building during a fire, what to do during a tornado. We're now teaching them what to do when there's an active attack, whether that's to stay, hide, fight, or flee. We also need to be doing things like we have put a trauma kit with every officer. This is one of the reasons why we did that, so that they could bring that medical equipment right into the scene immediately. Well, one of the things we're talking about is why aren't we putting those trauma kits in every single APR box in the school? Or I'm sorry, a AED box in the school. AEDs where we teach children how to resuscitate people if they're having a heart attack and put the pads on them and shock them. You know what I'm talking about?
I know what you're talking about. Yes.
Well, it's required that a box be on every floor in every school building that has that equipment.
Okay.
The children are trained how to utilize that. Why don't we put a trauma kit in there as well and teach them that, hey, if you have a kid that's fallen through a plate glass door and they've cut an artery in their leg, this is how you apply a tourniquet and keep them from bleeding to death. Same applies if they're in the middle of an attack and they're gravely injured. Why not teach that and have that as a resource for us? And, many people will say that's crazy that we're teaching our kids how to treat gunshot wounds. Well, we're really teaching them to treat any kind of wound. But we also have to deal with the reality of the situation. And until we start changing the hearts and minds of the people in our society, this is not going to improve.
Well, I agree. So some of the things you talked about was better security at the school, and I thought I heard that one of the doors was unlocked at the school, so he was able to just get in.
Yeah, and who knows if that's correct?
Yeah,
or not.
I don't know if it's correct or not, but certainly
always a possibility.
So certainly, I heard some expert yesterday talk about like in some banks when you go in. You go in and the door in front of you, is not open immediately, and they do some kind of scan, and then it opens up. Do we need something like that in our schools?
Absolutely. Many of them have adopted it. One of the most progressive schools on school security, specifically for active attacks, is right here in Indiana. Do you know that?
No, I didn't know that.
Yeah, and it's actually just southeast of Indianapolis. And is one of probably the strongest school for safety, physical safety, security safety in the nation. And so there are a myriad of steps that can be taken. Now, here's what's funny, not funny, but ironic, is that people will say, but all those things cost too much money. Yet they'll spend $1 million on putting AstroTurf on their football field for the high school.
Yeah,
right.
That's true.
Not saying it has to be either or, but you should be doing both if you're going to do it, and make the investments.
What about in New York? I know at one of the schools, and I won't say here which one in Indianapolis, but kids were bringing their guns in the book bags and had clips. I know in New York, because of the gun violence they was having, that a lot of the students have to go through metal detectors to get into school. Is that something that you see as viable for schools?
Well, schools have gone back and forth on that issue.
Okay.
Typically, what we're seeing now is the attacks are coming from the outside in.
Right.
It may still be a student, but coming from the outside in. So that's not going to solve everything. So it's like everything else. There's no simple answer. It's going to take pieces of a puzzle that you got to put together to make the defense of that site as strong as possible, and the defense of the children, which is what you're really defending in there. And this is where parents play a role. I think the biggest thing for parents to do is, rather than getting bogged down in the latest political debate on CNN or Fox News, go to your school and find out what they specifically are doing for security for your child.
Right, that's true.
And play an active role in that. And here again, I think we need to support law enforcement. The women and men who risk their lives. We see these stories now that are coming out of these officers that were responding and running into this, risking their lives to stop this. But also these discussions on, should you have professionally trained armed police officers in your school? I would advocate yes.
Well, I think you certainly do today.
But Rev, we've had many people that have said not only don't do it, but have been actively removing the armed officers out of the schools. And then we have these things occur. It's not saying that this specific incident, that played a role. It just highlights the fact of what's going on in your child's school.
Right.
What say you? Is there an armed officer in that school right now, today, with your kids?
Well, it could have been so much worse yesterday if it wasn't for that school police officer. Instead of 19 kids being killed, we could have had 30, 40, 50 kids killed,
exactly right.
But before enough police officers would have been able to get there, to take the person out. So.
Well, and Rev, this is one lone wolf attacker.
Right.
What happens if you have a well-trained group that's going in specifically to do an attack, a terroristic attack?
Right.
These are the things that we have to think about in law enforcement.
Right.
And those are the things we're going to have to start thinking about as a community as well.
I agree with that. I agree with that. And that certainly is a hot issue right now, in the country, as to, how no place seems to be safe anymore. Churches are not safe.
Well, that's what's next.
Yeah, I know. And as a pastor of a church, we're now talking about, the possibility of, how do we train members of our church?
Sure.
To help provide security and have them with weapons in the church, spread out at different locations if someone comes in.
Many houses of worship have had to take those steps.
Yes.
But again, it goes back to this question. Are you worth protecting yourself?
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And unfortunately, we're in a day and age where that's required, but I would suggest to you that's always been required.
Right.
You've always had to have some level of self-defense because police can't be everywhere at all times.
That's true.
And evil will always follow the path of least resistance. So the evil one doesn't say, Reverend Harrison's church, they didn't prepare today, so we'll leave them alone.
Right.
No, that's exactly when they come to attack.
Right, that's true.
And that's true for our homes, our neighborhoods, or whatever the case may be. So that's why it's so vitally important we stand together. We stay focused on good prevention efforts. We educate our fellow neighbors about the facts of what's going on. And then we also talk about what does it require to have good, strong intervention that is quick and effective so that if the bad thing does happen, we minimize the amount of damage and the lives lost.
So is the tactic now, when you get that kind of call, if you arrive on the scene as the first officer, you go in now?
Yeah, so see, that's one of the things that people don't think about. Our officers, we specifically train our officers to respond and make entry and intervene immediately, even if they are by themselves. Now, this is what else we train our officers on.
Okay.
If you're that first officer arriving, this is what we teach them. You're going to make entry, you're going to intervene, and you're going to try to engage that suspect so that you can interrupt the lives that they are taking, right? But the other thing that we teach that officer is you're probably not coming out. Now think about that.
Yes.
We teach that up front. Understand
Wow.
you're going to make entry.
Right.
And when you make entry, you're probably not coming out alive.
Okay. Wow.
And people say, so what do your officers do? They go in by the dozens.
Right.
They don't hesitate. Now, that's why I always say the women and men who step forward and do this job, they are unique because they are willing to do those things. And they literally are willing to lay down their lives when that call comes. Now, we never know when the call is going to come.
Right.
So people say, well, what do? You never know when it's going to happen. That's why you prepare. Why don't we all follow that example? That's why you prepare ahead of time. You've resolved in your heart. You've resolved with your faith. You've resolved with your family. This is what I do, what I'm willing to risk, and this is what I may be called upon to do. That's pretty serious stuff. And our officers do it unflinchingly. And we actually train our officers to drive out the natural human reaction, which is to run.
Right.
Get away from the danger.
That's true. That's true.
To throw that out and actually run toward the danger.
You know, we had the shooting here at FedEx last year when, where 8 people were killed. Are there laws on the books now that I think y'all use the term red flag, an individual that should not be allowed to purchase a weapon? Is that kind of universal nationally from state to state?
It is not.
It's not.
No.
Okay.
So Indiana was one of the leading states in that. Now, a lot of people say the big red Indiana state, and they're all pro Second Amendment, no gun restrictions, all these other things. We were one of the first states to invoke a red flag law. It's called the Jake Laird Law. It was named after Officer Jake Laird, who laid down his life in 2004 in a mass killing. That was an active attack occurring in a neighborhood on the south side of Indianapolis.
Right.
5 officers were shot in that. Jake lost his life. And we invoked this law in Indiana that's a red flag law that says that if a person has been identified, we have had to take intervention with them either through arrest or through what's called an immediate detention, which is to detain somebody on a mental health hold.
Okay.
They can be red flagged. Their weapons can be seized. We can get a search warrant, remove those weapons from their home, keep them in custody, in our custody, until a court reviews that matter. It doesn't strip the subject of their Second Amendment rights. In fact, it provides due process to ensure that a court reviews to see if they should have those weapons returned or if they should not, and then they would be on this red flag list, meaning that when they then go to purchase a firearm, it would come up as a red flag. Now, in the FedEx incident, what we learned is that subject had an immediate detention, had intervention from law enforcement, had firearms seized. But unfortunately, what we found and what we learned and what was admitted to was that the prosecutor in that matter did not pursue the court proceeding. And as a result, the red flag was never established on the suspect, and he was able to go and purchase more weapons. And that played a tragic role in all of this. So in that matter, we had a red flag law on the books, but here's the key. You got to apply the law.
Right.
And in that matter, the law was not given a chance to work by the prosecutor. And unfortunately, we had a tragic outcome that resulted from that. So as a result of that, though, Rev, the local Indianapolis courts changed the whole procedure and said, don't even take these to the prosecutor anymore. Bring them directly to the courts.
Okay.
That's huge. I've never seen the courts take a step to remove a prosecutor from the process. But that happened here. And since that has occurred, the number of red flag filings and findings where the court says, yes, you're going on the red flag list has dramatically gone up, which is a good thing because we have a step that ensured due process. Subject is fairly reviewed. And before we take their rights, we provide due process in that. And then once the decision's made, they go on that list. still doesn't preclude somebody from illegally obtaining firearms. But if they go through the process to purchase one, they would be red flagged and identified.
This is Rev Harrison with Real Talk, and I have with me my guest, Rick Snyder from the FOP 86, and we're kind of talking about mass shootings and policing in this country. Rick, what about the issue that we hear talked about a lot? Will it make a difference? And that is this kind of, is it universal background checks? And what is that?
Well, again, it's kind of like when people use the term assault weapons.
Okay.
There is no such thing as an assault weapon.
Okay.
Right? So it's vernacular that gets used, so it can become confusing because I always ask people, so what's an assault weapon? Well, you know, they may try to describe one, and usually when they describe it, they're not describing it correctly, even what they mean, right? Okay. So a key factor is when we're talking about rifles are often the discussion, right? The AR-15 style weapon and all those other things. You'll hear people talk about an AR-15 that's a fully automatic machine gun. Right. That's not correct. That's not true. They're not fully automatic. They're semi-automatic. Okay. A point you made earlier, they fire no differently than the handgun. Right. You have to pull a trigger every time for a bullet to be fired. Right. The difference is they have high velocity, and they can have magazines that hold a greater quantity of bullets, ammunition. But as you pointed out, you can get high capacity magazines for handguns as well. You can. So again, a lot of times when we're talking about that as an issue, a lot of it is semantics and appearances of the weapon. Okay. But for all intents and purposes, the weapon is no different and doesn't function any differently. So that's a big misnomer. When we talk about universal background checks, I believe what we're going to find out is that in Texas, they have background checks when you purchase firearms. So it sounds like this suspect purchased 2 firearms through a regular background check. He did. And had no issues. So a universal background check wouldn't have made any difference in that case. And these are always the things that people fall into. And then that's when it starts becoming political and agenda driven. But it really has to be factual. Were there opportunities to intervene ahead of time? Yes or no? And when we talk about these laws, would these laws have provided any kind of intervention ahead of time? Yes or no? Oftentimes, you're going to find that they don't. Why? Because you cannot predict evil all the time. And somebody can play by all the rules, and then if they have evil in their heart, they can become a tragedy. Anybody out here today legally driving their car with a driver's license, they went through the testing, they passed the test, they did everything they were supposed to do, never got a traffic ticket in their lives, could go downtown and run over 40 people today. Yeah, that's true. If they decided to do that. That's true. There's very little that you're going to do to be able to prevent that other than identifying changes in folks or mental health issues or this change in their hearts ahead of time. That's why we should not be fertilizing and seeding violence to begin with. We shouldn't be glorifying it. We shouldn't be lifting it up as an example for our youth and for society as a whole. Yet we do that day in and day out. And so the very people that we'll hear talk about how we should change this law or change that law often are some of the people promulgating and lifting up violent rap songs, violent movies, violent video games. And we can't have it both ways in this equation. And that's why we've got to talk about that. That's why there's value in talking about gun safety as well. Why aren't we teaching our children more about if you do find a firearm, what should you do? Run away, don't touch it, and tell an adult. There's a lot to be learned there, and we need to be having those discussions with our kids. Instead, we say, oh, I don't want to talk about guns with my kids. That's a terrible thing to do. Yet you'll let little Johnny go in the next room and play some combat game on a video game where he's holding the gun and being taught how to shoot people. That's true.
But in the final portion of our conversation, we have to talk about Indianapolis and the violence in Indianapolis. And as of today, we're at 86 homicides. I think the city has it at 83 compared to, I think we was at 99 last year. 359 people shot, 69 people stabbed. in the first 145 days. Where are we at in Indianapolis? I know some feel like, we're heading in the right direction. Does it look like that to you?
We're not.
We're not. Okay.
No, we're here again, we get politicians involved and they start talking about things are moving in the right direction.
Okay.
No, they're not.
Okay.
We have had 86 of our fellow neighbors killed in our city so far this year.
Right.
And stop just talking about guns. We just had this young lady that was murdered in downtown Indianapolis, stabbed in the neck by a person that police had arrested 2 times prior.
Wow.
For threatening or attempting to stab 2 other women in downtown Indianapolis.
Wow.
Opportunities to intervene, and yet we find out that the prosecutor's office didn't file charges on those cases. The suspects back out, and now we have this tragedy. And I just always say to people, ask that young lady's family, do they think that the numbers are moving in the right direction?
Right.
No.
Yeah.
And when you Rev, when you look at those other numbers, the number of non-fatal shootings and stabbings, not just the deaths, it clearly shows you that we're not. And you know as well as I do, we've been around long enough, we are on the edge of going off the cliff. And you just compared the numbers to last year, which was the all-time historic record for violence. So what that means is if we're not exceeding that pace yet, we are now currently on pace to be the second deadliest year in the history of the city of Indianapolis.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
That's not a real marked improvement.
That's true.
And so we've got to tackle these issues. And there's so many of these where we had opportunities to intervene. I keep stressing that. When we have the tragedy occur, look to see if there were opportunities to intervene before. If there were, do it without the motive isn't to finger point, other than to point at the opportunity to intervene and then say, how do we fix that and not do that again next time? That's how we're going to prevent these things from occurring. And we have to have strong law and we have to have strong order in the interim to get these numbers back down. And Rev, I got people calling me all the time from the neighborhoods telling me, they stop me in the neighborhoods and tell me, don't leave. Don't let the police give up. We need you. We want you here. And they want strong law and order, high visibility presence to get control back over the neighborhoods from the very violent actors that are out there taking the lives in our neighborhoods. We have to get that support tied together, and we have to demand better from our political officials.
Rick, thank you so much for joining me. We certainly have to get back together after the summer. We may have a different conversation after June, July, and August. But thank you again for joining me. This is Rev Harrison, and this has been Real Talk. Join me next time as I bring more Real Talk and more real issues that affect our community here in Indianapolis and across the country. This is Rev Harrison. I pray that you have a blessed and wonderful day.
This is Real Talk with Reverend Charles Harrison.
Be sure to like and subscribe to this podcast.
And be sure to check out other great podcasts on the All Indiana Podcast Network.
Online now at allindianapodcast.com.